Rain hammered the reinforced plate glass of my bookstore hard enough to make the old brass bell above the front door tremble. I stood behind the mahogany counter with a first edition Hemingway open on green felt, working a dry microfiber cloth along the top edge of the dust jacket. Outside, October rain blurred the streetlights into amber streaks across the pavement. Inside, 60,000 books stood exactly where they belonged. The shop had been closed for 20 minutes. The iron deadbolt was locked. My black coffee was still warm. Nothing required fixing. Then somebody hit the front door from the other side. The bell exploded into sound. I looked up. Audrey James pushed through the door, fought the wind long enough to pull it shut, and leaned against the wood while water ran from her coat onto the entry mat. I was already moving. Audrey had been my closest friend for 6 years. She knew which shelf held my emergency flashlight, how I took my coffee, and why I never loaned first editions to anyone who folded page corners. I knew the sound of her laugh from 2 rooms away. I also knew the expression she wore when something had gone badly enough that jokes would be useless. That was the expression she wore now. Her dark hair was wet from the storm. A manila envelope was crushed beneath one hand. "My boiler ruptured," she said. I took a clean towel from beneath the counter and handed it to her. "How bad?" The mechanical room flooded. Then water started coming through the roof over my drafting space. "Your equipment?" I covered what I could. I looked toward the stockroom door. My bookstore occupied the oldest surviving commercial building on the block. The rear room had temperature control, humidity monitoring, and enough open floor space for estate collections. It was also less than 10 minutes from Audrey's studio. "If the rain is already reaching the drafting area, we move your tools tonight," I said. "My stockroom is dry, climate-controlled, and large enough." Audrey did not answer. Instead, she held out the envelope. "That isn't the worst part." I opened it. October 12th. Notice of lease violation. Demand to cure or vacate. 7 days. The landlord's name sat at the bottom. Victor Vance. I knew him by reputation before I ever met him. He owned most of 4th Street and had spent 6 months buying out commercial tenants for a condominium development. Audrey had refused his offer. She was the last tenant preventing him from delivering vacant possession of the full block to his developers. "He wants me gone before the end of the month," she said. "The condo financing closes if he hands over the entire site vacant." I looked at the notice again. Audrey's restoration studio occupied the ground floor. Above it was a converted loft she had used as her home for almost 5 years. Vance was claiming that arrangement violated an old commercial use provision in the lease. "So if you leave voluntarily, he gets his development site?" "Yes." "And if you stay?" "He threatens eviction, legal fees, and whatever else his attorney can manufacture." She removed the wet towel from her hair and looked toward the storm outside. "I can't put my tools in storage across town. Half the molds can't tolerate uncontrolled humidity. And I still have the museum restoration contract due next month. That solves one problem." She looked back at me. "My stockroom." "Miles, you need somewhere dry tonight. It is 10 minutes away, secure, and designed to protect things more fragile than your plaster molds." A small line appeared between her brows. "And where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" "Upstairs." Her eyes narrowed. "You just decided that?" "I have an apartment." "You have an apartment designed for a monk who happens to own too many books." "It still has heat." The rain struck the window again. Audrey looked down at the eviction notice. She had water entering her studio, equipment that could not remain there safely, and a landlord trying to compress a legal dispute into a deadline short enough to panic her into leaving. Walking away was not a real option. Neither was waiting for the storm to improve. "Fine," she said. I folded the notice carefully. "We move the fragile equipment first. The rest can wait until morning." She finally took a breath that reached the bottom of her lungs. "Your definition of friendship is unusually logistical. It has kept you dry for almost 3 minutes. That might be a record." I picked up my keys Drink the tea in the back office while I call Owen. Owen is going to hate us. Owen likes complaining. This will enrich his evening. Owen Brooks arrived 20 minutes later wearing a raincoat, work gloves, and an expression suggesting friendship had disappointed him for the final time. He managed the bookstore 3 afternoons a week and had known me since university. I was eating dinner, he said. You were eating cereal. That was dinner. Audrey gave him an apologetic smile. My studio is flooding. Owen looked at her soaked coat, then at me. Why didn't you lead with that? Because then you wouldn't have had an opening complaint. He pointed at me. That is exactly the behavior that makes people worry about you. We took my delivery van and Owen's pickup. The studio was worse than Audrey had described. Water had crossed half the floor. We did not discuss Vance while we worked. There was no time. Audrey directed. I lifted. Owen labeled. The 3 of us moved the drafting equipment, boxed molds, rolled drawings, hand tools, and the portable dehumidifier before the water reached them. Audrey knew exactly how each object needed to travel. This crate stays vertical. I adjusted my grip. Why? Plaster rosette molds. That answered nothing. If you tilt it, I will become unpleasant. Owen grunted from the other side. More unpleasant? Audrey looked at him. Owen reconsidered. Vertical it is? By midnight. The rear stockroom of my bookstore contained the working heart of Audrey's restoration business. Her primary drafting table went beneath the old history shelves. I plugged in the brass articulating lamp she used for detail work. Warm light spread across the polished wood. Audrey stood beside the table and ran her palm once along the edge. Not dramatically. Just enough to make sure it was real. I handed her a bottle of water. Temporary. She nodded. Temporary? Owen pulled off his gloves. I'll open the store tomorrow. I looked at him. I can open the store. You carried half an architectural workshop through a storm. I own the shop. And I possess keys. Owen. He tucked them into his pocket. Go upstairs. That was the first time that night I let someone else finish something for me. Audrey noticed. She said nothing. Upstairs, my apartment was warm, quiet, and built around habits that had not changed in years. Tea in the left cabinet. Coffee beside the kettle. Books arranged by subject. Shoes beneath the bench. The guest room contained a pull-out couch. 287 encyclopedias waiting to be cataloged. And enough archive boxes to make navigation theoretical. I can clear it, I said. Audrey looked inside. A stack of reference volumes leaned over the couch like a geological hazard. You said this was a guest room. It has aspirations. She laughed for the first time all night. I gathered pillows and a gray wool blanket from the linen cupboard. When I returned to the hall, my bedroom door was open. Audrey was sitting against the headboard on the left side of the bed. She had changed into dry lounge clothes she kept in the emergency bag she had brought from the studio. She looked at the blanket in my arms, then at me. I'm sleeping here tonight. I stopped. My guest room has been rejected? Your guest room contains enough encyclopedias to alter the floor load. That is an exaggeration. It is a structural assessment. I started to answer. She lifted one hand. I'm taking the left side, unless that makes you uncomfortable. If it does, I'll take the couch in the living room. There it was. A choice. I looked at the king-sized mattress, then at the storm shaking the window. The bed is fine, I said. Opposite sides. Agreed. And I'm taking the heavy blanket. You have a duvet. You steal duvets. I have never stolen anything in my life. December, 3 years ago, cabin trip. That was thermal redistribution. I set the extra pillow on my side. Good night, Audrey. Her smile lingered. Good night, Miles. I switched off the lamp. The storm continued beyond the windows. I stayed on the far right side. Audrey stayed on the left. Between us was enough empty mattress to satisfy a surveyor. By the time I woke the next morning, she was already in the kitchen. The eviction papers covered the table. A mug of black coffee waited beside my chair. I picked it up. You made this? You helped move 3 tons of my business. It was not 3 tons. You're welcome. I sat. Audrey had marked several sections with a red pen. This clause, she said. Vance says the loft violates commercial-only use. I read it. Something bothered me immediately. Not because I knew landlord law. I did not, but I knew documents. The provision referenced an older municipal preservation designation. A number appeared in the margin. P-92-417. I had seen that format before. My bookstore's building file contained similar references from the historic district conversion in the 90s. What's this? I asked. Audrey leaned over. That preservation reference? Yes. The city used it when they approved my facade restoration 2 years ago. I looked up. You had the facade formally signed off? Of course. I had to file before and after elevations, material reports, photographs, mortar samples, everything. Do you have the approval? In my project archive. I pointed to the eviction notice. Then your attorney should see both. My attorney moved firms last year. Do you have another one? No. I took out my phone. Owen's sister works with a commercial property attorney. Audrey stared at me. You know that? I remember useful things. You remember everything. Not everything? What don't you remember? People who dog-ear books. That is because you erase them from your life. I called Owen. By 10:30, we had a name. Claire Donovan. Commercial leasing and historic property disputes. She agreed to review the notice that afternoon. I did not tell Audrey she was legally safe. I did not tell her Vance's notice was invalid. I had no authority to promise either. What I could tell her was simpler. The lease says 30 days in one place and 7 in another. The preservation reference exists. Claire can tell us what either one actually means. Audrey wrapped both hands around her coffee. That is significantly less comforting than you telling me Vance is wrong. It is also more useful. I hate that you're right. You say that often. Because you create opportunities. Claire met us by video that afternoon. She reviewed the lease, notice, facade approval, and preservation number. The 7-day demand is questionable, she said. Your lease contains a longer notice provision for this category of dispute. I would not surrender possession based on this document alone. Audrey sat straighter. And the loft? I need the original preservation ordinance before I answer that. I tapped the reference number. I may be able to locate the historical record. Claire looked at me. Locate it, don't interpret it. Understood. And Mr. Cooper? Yes? Do not threaten anyone with legal claims on my behalf. Audrey covered a smile with her coffee mug. I like her, she said after the call. You like everyone who tells me what not to do. Correct? On October 14th, Claire formally notified Vance that Audrey disputed the notice. She also set October 28th as the deadline for his response to a counterproposal. Withdraw the accelerated eviction demand. Preserve the existing lease while the preservation issue was reviewed. And negotiate in good faith over relocation if the development genuinely required vacant possession. That gave us time. Not victory. Time. For the next 2 weeks, Audrey worked from my stockroom. The bookstore changed. Wood glue joined the smell of old paper. Blueprint tubes appeared beside biographies. The brass drafting lamp remained on after closing. And every morning, I found a second coffee mug drying beside the sink. One Tuesday evening, a pencil clattered in the back room. I finished the line I was writing in the ledger and walked toward the sound. Audrey sat at her drafting table beneath 3 overlapping project schedules. The museum inspection is the 18th, she said. Custom millwork arrives on the 20th. If I miss the inspection window, I lose 4 weeks. I looked at the corkboard. Then at the stack of calendars beneath the supply shelf. I took the largest laminated one, pinned it to the wall, and uncapped a marker. Inspection. 18th, I wrote it, millwork. 20th, extension portal. Requests need 3 business days. I marked the 15th. Audrey stopped sorting papers. What are you doing? Removing dates from your head. I drew an arrow between the permit request and revised inspection window. She leaned back. You've turned my panic into office supplies. It is one of my better skills. Her mouth curved. What about the museum? You call them tomorrow. Ask whether facade documentation can be reviewed separately from millwork completion. They might say no. They might. I handed her the marker. That part belongs to you. She took it. The following morning, she made the call herself. The museum approved the revised inspection sequence. One problem closed. On October 26th, the front bell struck hard enough to hit the glass. Victor Vance entered without looking at a single book. Owen was at the register. I was shelving a collection near the front. Audrey worked in the stockroom. Vance dropped a thick folder onto the mahogany counter. I want James. Owen looked at me. I approached. Mr. Vance, she's storing her equipment here. My stockroom is not part of your lease. This concerns my property. Then Claire Donovan is your contact for lease matters. His expression tightened. She has until Friday to clear the building. I looked at the folder but did not touch it. Is that a court order? No, it is final notice from council. Then we'll send it to hers. Audrey appeared in the stockroom doorway. Vance turned toward her. Friday noon, he said. Anything left behind gets removed by the contractors. Audrey's hand closed around the brass caliper she was holding. Claire's instructions from our last call came back to me. Do not argue law. Preserve communication. Refer him to counsel. I stepped slightly to the side rather than in front of Audrey. Would you like me to ask him to leave? I asked her. Vance stared at me. Audrey looked at him. Yes? I nodded. Mr. Vance, you've delivered your message. Future lease communications go through Ms. Donovan. Please leave the store. He gave a humorless laugh. You think paper's going to save her? No, Audrey said. Her voice was steady. My lawyer will answer the paper? That stopped him more effectively than anything I could have said. He picked up the folder. Friday. Then he left. The bell snapped behind him. Owen waited until the door shut. Charming. Audrey put down the caliper. Her hand shook once against the table. I reached for the phone. I'll call Claire. No. I looked at Audrey. I'll call her. She picked up her own phone and walked into the back room. 5 minutes later, she returned. Claire says Vance still needs lawful process before anyone removes property. She wants the new letter scanned tonight. Owen pointed toward the office. I'll scan it. I looked at him. He raised an eyebrow. I have mastered buttons. I let him. That night, Audrey stayed downstairs after closing. At 2 a.m, the brass lamp still glowed beneath the stockroom door. I could have gone in. Instead, I went to the local history shelves. P-92-417. That was what I needed. The bookstore held municipal planning volumes going back nearly a century because no one else seemed to want them. I pulled the 1992 register. The preservation number appeared in the index. Then again in an amendment. The language did not magically say Audrey had won. It did something more useful. It connected mixed-use occupancy eligibility to buildings restored under an approved historic facade program. Audrey's city approval used the same reference. I photographed the pages, noted the volume and archive source, and emailed them to Claire. At 7:15, her reply came. This is relevant. Do not draw conclusions yet. I'm requesting a certified city copy. Reasonable? I printed the reference page anyway. Audrey had fallen asleep at the drafting table. A pencil remained beneath one hand. I placed the printout beside it. Her mug was empty. I carried it to the break sink, washed it, and poured fresh black coffee. Steam curled above the rim when I set it beside the paper. Then I went upstairs and made toast. 20 minutes later, rapid footsteps came up the stairs. Audrey entered the kitchen holding the printout. "You found the reference." "I found a reference." "Claire emailed me. The certified copy is being pulled this morning." I slid a plate toward her. "Toast?" She stared at the plate. "Miles? Eat first. You stayed up all night." I was awake, reading municipal planning records. I own a bookstore. At 2 in the morning, I have unusual hobbies. She put the paper beside the coffee. Then she looked at the calendar visible through the open stairwell, the stockroom beyond it, and finally back at me. "You moved my tools, you built the schedule. You found this and called a lawyer before telling me what it meant." I broke a piece of toast in half. That seemed sensible. "You also put coffee next to the document. I am beginning to regret creating that precedent." Her smile appeared slowly. "I'm calling Claire after breakfast." "Good. And if this gives us leverage, I want to use it to negotiate rather than spend a year fighting Vance." "Also good." She pulled out a chair. "I make that decision." "Yes." "You don't?" "Yes." Audrey took the toast. "Excellent. We're learning." By October 28th, the certified ordinance had arrived. Claire's interpretation was cautious but clear. Vance's commercial-only theory was substantially weakened by the Preservation Amendment and Audrey's city-approved restoration record. The 7-day notice also conflicted with the longer notice procedure in the lease. Claire sent a formal counteroffer that afternoon. Audrey would not surrender possession under the defective notice. However, if Vance genuinely needed vacant possession for redevelopment, she was willing to discuss a negotiated buyout covering the remaining lease value. Relocation expenses, equipment moving costs, and the interruption to her business? Vance rejected it, but he stopped threatening Friday removals. That told Claire more than his letter did. A settlement conference was scheduled for November 15th. The weeks between did not feel like waiting. Audrey finished the museum drawings. Her revised inspection passed. The custom millwork arrived 2 days later. Owen turned one corner of the stockroom into a temporary shipping lane so her project crates could leave without blocking bookstore deliveries. "You have turned my workplace into a transport hub," I told him. "I adapted." "That word sounds suspiciously like something Audrey taught you." "She is improving us." I was fine. Owen glanced at the second coffee cup beside the register. Clearly, by November 15th, Claire had assembled the legal file. Original lease, notice provisions, Preservation Amendment, city facade approval, Vance's threatening correspondence, Audrey's business interruption records, the redevelopment timeline. Nothing depended on one miraculous clause. It was leverage built from documents that supported one another. The settlement conference took place in Claire's office. Vance arrived with his lawyer. Audrey sat beside Claire. I sat beside Audrey because she had asked me to attend as a factual witness to the bookstore, confrontation, and as the owner of the temporary storage space. Nothing more. Vance's attorney began with an offer of $5,000 for immediate surrender. Audrey barely looked at the page. "No." Vance shifted. "You're delaying a development worth millions over a workshop." Audrey opened her folder. "My workshop is a business. My lease still has value. My equipment has moving costs. My active contracts have continuity costs." Claire slid the certified ordinance across the table. "And your asserted residential use violation is disputed for the reasons outlined here." Vance's attorney read it again. He had already seen it. The silence told me that. Audrey continued. "I am willing to relocate. I am not willing to be frightened out for free." Vance leaned forward. "What do you want?" Audrey slid her proposal across the table. 3 times the remaining commercial lease value, documented relocation expenses, professional moving for the restoration equipment, and reimbursement for temporary workspace costs. Vance stared at the number. That is absurd. Claire spoke for the first time in several minutes. Then we proceed through the scheduled lease dispute process and preserve our available claims. Your development timetable is not our client's responsibility. Vance's jaw moved. He looked at me. And what exactly are you? I did not answer immediately. Audrey could have. She did not. She left the choice to me. Her friend, I said, and the person storing her equipment? Vance gave a short laugh. Audrey looked at him. My terms don't depend on who Miles is to me. That ended the distraction. She tapped the proposal. They depend on the lease, the redevelopment deadline, and what relocation actually costs. Vance's lawyer asked for a private conference. They left the room. Audrey leaned back. Her fingers rested beside the folder, not shaking. Claire looked at her. If they come back lower, you do not have to accept. I know. What number works for you? Audrey gave it. Claire nodded. That is the number we hold. 26 minutes later, Vance returned. His final offer landed just above Audrey's threshold. She read every page. Claire read every page again. The agreement required Vance to fund professional relocation, buy out the remaining lease, waive the disputed occupancy claim, and release Audrey from future liability tied to the premises once the documented move was complete. Audrey signed. Vance signed. No shouting. No humiliation. Just ink. Outside Claire's building, the November air was cold enough to sharpen every sound. Audrey held the signed agreement inside her leather bag. You didn't call yourself my partner this time, she said. I was under strict instruction to remain a factual witness. Very disciplined. I have my moments. She stepped in front of me. I need a new studio. You do? I've been thinking about the bakery 2 doors down from your shop. I looked at her. You know about that? Owen showed me the listing. Traitor. Audrey smiled. High ceilings, good north light, loading access in the alley. I may also have looked at the square footage. Of course you did. The landlord has a reasonable reputation. Claire already reviewed the draft lease. That surprised me. Audrey enjoyed it. You're not the only one who can prepare options. No. The owner agreed to hold it until Monday. I nodded. Good. She stepped closer. Then she reached for my hand. Not accidentally. Not because she needed help crossing the street. Her fingers slid into mine and stayed there. I want the bakery, she said. I think it suits you. And until the upstairs apartment is ready? The guest room still contains encyclopedias. I know. I waited. She squeezed my hand. I would like to keep staying with you for a little while, if you still want me there. I looked down at our joined hands. Then back at her? Yes. A passing bus hissed against the wet street. Audrey moved to my side. And the left side of the bed? Negotiable. You've become difficult. I learned from an expert. She laughed, and we walked back toward the bookstore together. The following Monday, Audrey signed the bakery lease. Claire reviewed it first. Owen arrived at 7 in the morning with the delivery van and a box of pastries he claimed were essential moving equipment. We carried Audrey's drafting table out of my stockroom. For 6 weeks it had sat beneath the history shelves under the brass lamp. Now we rolled it 2 doors down. The bakery still smelled faintly of flour beneath the new paint. Sunlight came through the tall front windows and spread across the floorboards. Audrey chose the far wall. Here. Owen looked at me. Do not move it for her. I wasn't going to. You were thinking about it. Audrey pointed at a mark on the floor. 3 inches left? Owen and I moved it 3 inches. She stepped back. Perfect. The museum project resumed from the new studio that afternoon. Its restored facade drawings lay beneath the same brass lamp that had lit the stockroom. Her equipment was dry. Her lease was signed. Her business had an address again. Upstairs over my bookstore. One side of the bed remained hers while the bakery apartment renovation was completed. Temporary. Explicit. Chosen. 3 weeks later, another storm rolled through the city. Rain rattled against the bookstore glass the same way it had on October 12th. I stood behind the mahogany counter with the Hemingway open on green felt. The brass bell chimed. Audrey entered carrying 2 black coffees. No wet eviction envelope. No emergency. Just coffee. She placed one beside my hand. Your sanctuary appears intact. I looked around. Old books. Warm lamps. Owen complaining quietly while unpacking a shipment through the side window. The brass drafting lamp glowed inside Audrey's bakery studio 2 doors down. I picked up the coffee. It has changed. Audrey reached across the counter and took my hand. I let the book remain open. The end. Closing thoughts. Miles helped Audrey create room to make her own legal, business, and personal choices instead of deciding those choices for her. The green flag was consistency. Audrey kept control of her future, while Miles kept showing up with practical help and clear boundaries. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.